It was hot today. I'm pretty drained at this point. Dude, it wasn't that bad. We had to do something. You're right. Just like 20 minutes. Like biking. Well, if you were playing both ways, like you played offense or defense.
Hello! I invite you to hop or stand up and give some hugs, handshakes, and high fives to each other.
Hey, bro. Hey, Carly.
Now, how you doing back here in Florida?
I'm doing all right. How are you today, Paul?
Now, are you all ready for basketball
Oh,
season?
for sure. Yeah.
I'm excited.
Me too.
In the secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness, you are there. In the secret, in the quiet hour, I wait only for you, 'cause I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. In the secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness, you are there. In the secret, in the quiet hour, I wait only for you, 'cause I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. Can I have a seat for a minute? You know, I feel like with this sermon series through the Psalms, no matter what the theme of the psalm, I feel like each week is just kind of, for me, a new way to know God, even the ones that aren't really about knowing Him exactly. I feel like, for me, more than ever before, the Psalms through this series have become sort of like a gift to see into the heart of God in a way that I hadn't before. And this song, for me, also kind of portrays that image of knowing God. Do you have songs that transport you back to a time in your life? And this one for me takes me back to Camp Ileana and girls who have showered and gussied themselves up as best they could for worship in the evening at camp, and a youth band playing and singing the song, and kids who, in the best way they know how, want to know God as much as they can. And just in the last couple of weeks, Tim and I got a message from one of those girls, and she now lives in New York State. Her husband's a minister, they have kids. And one of the things she said in the message, it wasn't really about this, but it was something about like my time with you or in the youth showed me how to know God. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we didn't do anything else, if she never got enough pizza or we never played enough tag or kickball, I'm so thrilled that she figured out how to know God. And for me, this song portrays that, and I feel like this sermon series is such a gift to think about knowing God and just getting a glimpse into who He is. And I guess I kind of want to combine that and say that if our time here at the Grace Project, if we never do anything else, we love loving on people and helping people, but if we never help another person, if we never sing another song, if we never buy another black chair at Sam's Club, may it be known, that may it be said of us in the years to come that we figured out how to know God. And so let's just sing that again, and kind of with that in mind and with that purpose and that thought in our heads as we gather tonight to hear from His Word. In the secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness you are there. In the secret, in the quiet hour I wait only for you, 'cause I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you more. I want to touch you. I want to see your face. I want to know you more. God, may we spend our days longing to know you more and to know more of who you are, to have more of you in our lives, to know more of what you have in mind for us. And God, we long for that, to be people who know you and who are known by you. God, I look to you. I won't be overwhelmed. Give me vision to see things like you do. God, I look to you. You're where my help comes from. Give me wisdom. You know just what to do. I will love you, Lord, my strength. I will love you, Lord, my shield. I will love you, Lord, my rock. Forever all my days, I will love you, God. to do. And I will love you, Lord, my strength. I will love you, Lord, my shield. I will love you, Lord, my rock. Forever all my days, I will love you, God.
So, as most of you know, if you know me very well, you know I'm not a real big Facebook fan. And I like Facebook probably about as much as I like getting up here and speaking. So, why not take the two things that I love the most and combine them? So, but I want to share a Facebook post that's been on my mind here lately. And it's personal to me because it comes from a man. His name's Mark Thompson. He's married to Shanna's cousin. He's a preacher at the First Baptist Church in Brazil, Indiana. So I want to share his Facebook post from last Thursday. It says, "Today I went in for a second biopsy. I had a colonoscopy about 3 weeks ago, which revealed a rather large mass measuring 2 inches. The biopsy was performed and indicated it was benign, but 2 doctors said it was cancer based on their experience of its appearance. I was told yesterday, based on location, I may need a colostomy. Every time he would tell me that he thought it was cancer, I would hear God telling me it wasn't. I asked my church to pray. Today, when the second biopsy was to be performed, the doctors could not find it. The entire mass was gone. The dye was there where the mass was marked, but the mass was gone. The nurse said I had a beautiful colon, whatever that means. The doctor had a grin on his face he couldn't lose. He stated someone is definitely looking out for me. With my eyes still shut, I told him it was no coincidence. All the nurses came to see the before pictures Stacy had with her. One stated she couldn't wait to go home to tell her family. She said she wouldn't share my name. Stacy told her to please share my name and that God did this. Please know, no matter the outcome, God is still God. He owes me nothing. But today, he revealed himself in a miraculous way, and I give him praise." It's been on my heart ever since he posted that, and it reminds me of so many things that I forget that God's still God and he's in control, no matter what situation we're going through. I look at T-Ray and he's a prime example. God is still in control. And I know personally sometimes at communion time I can get wrapped up in reminding God of all my failures, like he doesn't already know them, but and all the silly things that I failed him with the previous week. And I just want to remind you that this evening, as we come into this time of communion, to remember all the joyous things that God's done for us too. So in Matthew 26, it says, whoops, I love that. As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and he blessed it. Then he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for this is my body." He took a cup of wine and he gave thanks to God for it. And he gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people." We pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the sacrifice of your Son. Thank you for what your Son has meant to all of us in our lives, Lord. We just pray that as we come to this time of communion, that we remember your Son and all the things he's done for us and all the things that you've done for us, God, and how you are in control. And we just want to thank you for all the blessings in our lives in this time. We ask these things in your name. If you're near a communion tray, pass them around.
I pray that you will produce that kind of heart in us, a heart that wants to know you, a heart that desires to draw close to you, a heart in which you truly are enough. While we might have many other things that we want, desire, and even need, that you'll bring us to the place where none of those other things come to fruition. If you and your presence in our lives is enough. And we can't make ourselves that way, so God, I pray that you produce those kind of hearts in us, even today. God, speak to us through your word and help us to learn more of what that looks like tonight and become those kind of people through your word. Lord, we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Go ahead and turn to Psalm 84. DJ, when we were singing that first song is a vineyard song as well. Yes. Do you remember that? Okay. Yes. So I don't know if y'all know this, but DJ went to the Vineyard Church, which you never heard of Vineyard. It's just there's still kind of a powerful denomination. Some of our kids who have gone to, I think at University of Illinois, there's a real strong Vineyard Church up in near University of Illinois, I believe. But he went to a big Vineyard Church out in Colorado. And Vineyard are known for just producing many, many worship songs, particularly kind of maybe 20 years ago. They just, it was like every good song that came out was a Vineyard song. And I always forget that, but like, I don't know if it was a couple weeks ago, we sang the song Amazed, Lord, I'm amazed by you. Who's that by again? What's the guy's name?
That song was...
Yeah, Jared.
Yeah.
Would you?
Oh, yeah, Jared Anderson.
Yeah, Jared Anderson. There you go. So anyway, so we sang that, and I just happened to notice who it was which I never noticed who writes songs. And obviously, I forget when I do. But he came up to me afterwards. He said, man, I've been in church. He said, I love that song. I've hung out with Jared before. I'm like, holy cow, you've hung out with Jared Anderson. That's pretty cool. He said, yeah, he used to come to our church all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, that's really neat. But so anyway, I noticed that again. I didn't know if that brought you back, but that was a Vineyard song. So I come from a line of men on my dad's side of the family that have a unique ability that's not necessarily a good ability. And the ability is this. They can go long stretches of time with never speaking to their wives. Like really long stretches of time. I don't know, some years ago we got on this subject, and my grandma, I never knew my grandpa on my dad's side. So just for reference, I feel like I take more after my mom, because my dad was a very quiet person. But I feel like I take more after my mom's side of the family. But I remember one time we were with my grandma, and somehow this subject came up, and my grandma made the statement that she didn't really know what it was like to have just a meaningful, intimate relationship with someone until my grandpa Bill. So my biological grandpa, Grandpa Charles, I never knew him. He died before I was born. And then she remarried my grandpa Bill, and then they were married for like 10, 15 years, something like that, and then he died. And then she got a boyfriend, and she said, I'm not marrying him because this isn't working out so well. So anyway, so they dated for like 15, 20 years before he passed away. He had actually had 3 wives as well. So I think they both just didn't want to jinx it. And they really had a great relationship. He's probably the closest thing I had to a grandpa. I just loved him dearly. So anyway, but he'd come over, every morning at 8 a.m. and they'd eat breakfast, and 9:30, 10 every night he'd go home. Or at least that's the story that I got. So anyway, I'm assuming it's true because my grandma was a good United Methodist. But anyway, so and I don't want to think about the alternative, but nevertheless. But she made the statement. She said, I never really knew what a meaningful and intimate relationship is with your spouse until your Grandpa Bill. I said, really? I said, you didn't have that with Grandpa Charles? She said, oh gosh, no. I'm like, really? She said, yeah. She said, no times he wouldn't even talk to me. He could go long stretches of time without talking to me. I'm like, really? She said, yeah. She said this. She said, he once went 9 years without talking to me. I was like, yeah. Thank you, Jill. That is the effect I was going for. Yes. And I was like, I looked at her about like what Jill was just looking at, and I said, how is that even possible? I mean, even things like, could you pass the butter? You know, who's picking up the boys from football practice? You know, things like that. And she said he would just communicate through the kids. You know, like, please, you know, ask your mom to do this, please. And he just 9 years. And in fact, I started thinking at what point I was like, at what point do you start keeping track? Like, I mean, I guess maybe after a week you start thinking, you know, we never talked this week. I wonder if this is going to continue. Or I don't know, maybe there was a short spell. Maybe there were some 5-year stints in there and 18-month stints in there. And so she just knew when a good one was coming and she started the clock. I don't know. But 9 years was the longest. So anyway, so I'm just baffled by this. My mom was there too. So anyway, she pulled me aside. She said, your dad could also go one time. I'm like, really? And she said, yeah, I mean, I knew my dad was quiet, but she said, yeah, your dad could do that. And I said, well, what was the longest time dad ever went without talking to you? She said, 3 months. I'm like, 3 months? Which, granted, in comparison to 9 years, seems like that's just a drop in the bucket. But in my mind, where I'm just thinking, you know, that stuff doesn't happen in my house, and somehow it flew under my radar. 3 months. My parents went with my dad, and now my dad said one word to my mom. Hey, do you want to take a shower first? Or do you want me to take a shower first? You know, hey, you know, I don't know what's for dinner. You know, none of that. It was just not even any sort of communication at all. Stunned. I was just stunned. Well, anyway, recently Jennifer and I were in a spat, and I had kind of just hit a point where I'm like, I don't know the way forward on this one. I don't know how she's hurting, I'm hurting, but I don't know how to fix this. And so I shifted into this mode where I was with her, but it was like I wasn't completely with her. And she started to panic because she knew the stories, and she thought, holy crap, it's been 20 years, but here it is. You know, which, in my defense, I never stopped talking to her. I mean, I was still communicating, but it was just like she could tell. I was going through the motions, but I was not connecting with her. It was like I was there, but I wasn't there. And she was like, oh my word, this is where it begins. I'm just, when do I start the stopwatch type thing? But it was that, and I know I guess I have that latent ability in me that I just haven't developed, and we'll pray that it never happens. But it was that moment of when we were where we were existing side by side, and I was going through the motions of what it meant to be a husband and a father and to be in a relationship with her. I was going through the motions, but we weren't connecting. That just frightened her so much. You know, one of the dangers of any sort of religious expression is we have this ability to go through the motions and not actually connect with the Father. I mean, it is so easy for us. You know, what would seem probably very painful for us in any sort of close relationship, and probably most married people in this room have experienced that at some point, kind of with their spouse, going through the motions but not really connecting. But what can seem so painful for us is something that is very easy for us to slip into when it comes to our relationship with God, to go through the motions, to do what we think we're supposed to be doing, but we're not really connecting with the Father. And when I say that, I'm not, to me, the corollary point is to not say, therefore, you know, we just need to do kind of, you know, I've become this advocate for this sort of loosey-goosey spirituality, you know, to just do anything that makes the spiritual goosebumps raise up on your skin, you know, it just, you know, that's not what I'm becoming an advocate for, because I believe our faith does take some very concrete expressions. In fact, I just read a book recently by a guy that used to be the pastor of a large charismatic megachurch. And he actually went through a transformation in his faith and led his church through this transformation to where they have become much more liturgical, much more, I say liturgical, kind of reciting prayers, creeds, things like that, and how meaningful that has been for him personally and for their church. He leads prayer conferences at their church where people from miles around come to see, and part of it's a kind of a liturgical part to that prayer service. And so anyway, but one of the things he said, which I really appreciated, is he said, he'll hear people say, I'm not just religious, I'm spiritual. And he says he doesn't like that. He always turns it around. He says, well, I'm not just spiritual, I'm religious. In other words, there is a concrete expression of this. I'm not just whatever makes the feathers fly. There's certain things I believe. There's some certain practices I do, and I believe they're very spiritual. But there is a concrete practice to what I do. And so I'm not advocating just kind of just whatever when it comes to our faith. But what I am saying is that we have this ability in us to go through the motions, but to do so without connecting with the Father on a personal level. And here's the thing. If we don't intentionally pursue Him, that just is not going to happen. Because I think inertia just kind of takes us into that mode. And we have to become people that intentionally pursue Him. And for me, what is helpful to me is when I get a glimpse of someone who does that well, who really knows what it means to passionately pursue the presence of God. And the dude who wrote, or dudette, I'm assuming it was a dude, but I guess it's possible to do that. Well, it says sons of Korah, so, those are usually dudes. But the dude who wrote Psalm 84 knows what it means to passionately pursue the presence of God. And so I want us to just read this and take some cues from him. So let's take a look at it. Psalm 84, and we're going to take it in 3 chunks. First chunk is verses 1 through 4. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. I long, yes, I faint with longing to enter the courts of the Lord. With my whole being, body and soul, I will shout joyfully to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow builds her nest and raises her young at a place near your altar. O Lord of heaven's armies, my King and my God, what joy, what joy for those who can live in your house, always singing your praises. So we're just to kind of sum up these 4 verses. This is someone that knows the delight of being in God's presence, of worshiping God. And now, this is, ancient, the ancient Israelite culture. And, so for us, because it's many years later, because, Jesus has come, the Holy Spirit has been released into our lives, when that happened, the Apostle Paul talks about us being the body of Christ, the people of God, being the temple of God's Spirit. So we have this sense that God is with us no matter where we are, that He's with us in the secret, in the quiet place, that He's with us when 2 or 3 are gathered, as Jesus said, that He is with us when we worship in a grand cathedral, that He's with us when we meet in the shed, that He can be with us wherever we are. So we have that sense. But they did not, at this point, they did not have that understanding. Their understanding of God's presence was that, they followed God in their collective, respective communities and whatnot. But the presence of God dwelt in the temple. That is where the presence of God was. And this is someone who just has this insatiable longing to be in God's temple because they have this insatiable longing for God's presence. And so you see, like the first verse says, how lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. How lovely is this building? How lovely. Because, why? Because I get to be in your presence. Verse 4, it says, what a joy for those who can live in your house, always singing your praises. For those who get to be here, it is like the greatest joy because they get to constantly be worshiping you, be singing your praises. It's the celebration of being in His presence. And in verse 2 and 3, he says some kind of interesting things that just kind of paint a picture of just how meaningful it is to him. So like in verse 2, it says this, I long, yes, I faint with longing to enter the courts of the Lord. That first word, I long, it's a word that expresses like deep yearning, deep desire. More than anything, I want to be in the presence of God, at the place of God. Then the second word It says, yes, I even faint with longing. That word, it's a different word. It means kind of being brought to the end of yourself, which there's no good, really, translation for it. So faint is probably your best bet. But it's this idea that I've expended everything. And I think that's what it's getting at in the next part. With my whole being, body, and soul. I have expended everything to be in the presence of God and to experience the presence of God. This is someone that is not going through the motions. They have this desire to know God, and it takes them to the end of themselves to know Him. It's this beautiful, beautiful picture. But then verse 3 is kind of this interesting dealio. He says, even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow builds her nest and raises her young at a place near your altar. O Lord of heavens, armies, my God, my King and my God. It's like he's at the temple, and the temple was kind of definitely the courtyards were an open air kind of area. But then maybe even the temple itself would have at least been like kind of access to it. And so he sees somewhere in the process of that, whether it's out in the courtyard or whether he's actually in the temple proper. And but he looks up on, it's like he looks up on one of the columns, and he sees some birds, a bird who has made its nest. And as he looks at that, it's like where his mind goes is, well, of course a bird would make its nest here. Because that bird gets to be close to your altar, gets to experience your presence day in and day out. I mean, and so obviously that's not what's going on. I mean, the bird just kind of found a convenient place to make a nest. But it's like he is so enamored with the presence of God. That's how he interprets that. Meeting in a building such as this, we always had some interesting experiences. I don't know if y'all remember the Sunday when we came in and a vine had grown up through the floor and wrapped itself around the mic cord. So there's always interesting things with this building. Well, a couple of interesting things with this. One is we actually have a nest of birds right up in there because our soffit is kind of pulled down and rotted out and nasty. You can see it if you go out and look. And there's a nest of birds there. And every once in a while, you can actually hear them chirping. Sometimes even like during youth group on Wednesdays, or I think I've heard it before on a Sunday. And it's like there's birds nested right there. Another thing that we've had before, there have been times when we've had issues with our heating and our air. And part of the problem initially was, there have been a couple of different problems, but one of the problems initially was our ductwork runs underneath, and it's kind of a soft ductwork, the flex ductwork, that's what you call it. But anyway, but we didn't have covers on our foundation units. Thankfully, Russ Swan has since fixed this, or else we'd probably still be having this problem. But because of that, animals could get under our foundation. And there were times when our air was blowing, and it wasn't like, I mean, in the hottest months and the coldest months, our air struggles to keep up just because it's an old building. But there were times where it was just working even at a lesser level. What is going on here? And it turned out that there was a very industrious cat in the neighborhood that had discovered that if they got under there and pulled down one of those ducts, they could make themselves a nice little bed. So in the winter months, when it's cold out and we have the heat kind of running just kind of, so this at a low level, that made a nice little bed for them where they get their own personal heating bed. And in the summer months when it's so warm out, they get their own nice little personal fan air conditioning bed. And the reason why we know that was because when the HVAC guy came and looked at it, he said, well, I know what your problem is, because there is a dead cat down there, and next time I'm charging for the cat extraction, because I'm not doing it. That was disgusting. But that is what had happened. It would be like if I reflected on that and I said, you know what? God's presence is so sweet in this place. The cat has to make a bed right there so it can be close, and the birds have to build their nest right there. And in fact, we love each other so well here that even natural enemies are brought together in this place, as the cats and the birds want to be close to God's healing presence in this place. Now we know that's not the case. The cat wanted its own personal, heating vent and whatnot, and the birds just found a convenient place. But it would be like me reflecting on what God is doing in this place and seeing that present in our lives. That's what the psalmist is doing. Which, while Obviously, that's not true. Nevertheless, we get a window into the heart of the psalmist. It's like that God's presence is so rich here. And he's just so celebrating that. So anyway, let's keep going. Verses 5 through 7. Because what he says in verse 4 is he says, what joy for those who can live in your house, always sing your praises. I mean, people who get to live here and be here constantly, they are constantly in your presence. So then the question is, what about those who are not constantly there? And verse 5 through 7 speaks to that. It says this, what joy for those whose strength comes from the Lord, who have set their minds on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. When they walk through the valley of weeping, it will become a place of refreshing springs. The autumn rains will clothe it with blessings. They will continue to grow stronger, and each of them will appear before God in Jerusalem. These verses seem to have just a very specific context in mind, and that is a group of Jews traveling from where they live to Jerusalem on a holy pilgrimage. That was very big in the Jewish faith. Particularly, they had tons of holidays and tons of festivals, but the three big ones were Passover, Pentecost or Feast of Weeks, and the feast. Passover, they celebrate the Exodus from Egypt. Pentecost or Feast of Weeks celebrates the giving of the law to Moses, and tabernacles or booths in the fall, where they remember that they used to be kind of travelers, so to speak, sojourners, and God's presence went with them as they traveled in the wilderness. And so those were the big festivals, and so faithful Jews would make pilgrimages back to Jerusalem on those festivals when they could. And of course, Passover was the biggest one. You know, we see this happen in the life of Jesus a number of times. We see Jesus' parents bring him there as a boy, and it was for the festival. So anyway, well, that went on. I mean, that was true for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so this psalm is envisioning a context where there are these worshipers who live somewhere else, and they're on a trip going back to Jerusalem. And they are so excited to get to be in the presence of God and to worship him that it just becomes this never-ending source of strength for them. It says, literally, it says they go from strength to strength. It just becomes this wellspring of life and of strength and of joy. In fact, so much so that it transforms the situations that they are involved in. If you look at verse 6, it says this, when they walk through the valley of weeping, it will become a place of refreshing springs. Literally, it says that when they walk through the valley of Baca. And scholars really struggle with that, what it's referring to. Because here's the thing, Baca, they don't know where the valley of Baca was, but Baca elsewhere, in one other place in the Old Testament, is translated balsam trees. And balsam trees grew in like desert-like conditions. Okay? And so their vision, they think maybe that there was a place, and that on the route of these particular pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem, that they knew that this place, it was just a desert-like place where a lot of balsam trees grew. So it was called the Valley of Balsam. So it's a place that's kind of a depressed place. It's a dry place. It's an arid place. And the presence of these worshipers coming into this place fills this valley with life and with joy and with excitement because of their passion and their excitement to be in the presence of God. The other way of understanding is Baca is very similar to the Hebrew word for weeping, and so that's why this Bible translates it the Valley of Weeping. And some scholars think maybe it's this metaphorical valley, like when you go through those times where you're just, life is really kicking you into teeth, and you're really, really struggling. That they're envisioning that these worshipers, because of their passionate desire to be in the presence of God, that it transforms those situations and it transforms those experiences. And my guess is it could be both, that there was actually a place called that, a valley, a desert-like place, and how they brought joy to that, and then, the psalmist thought, but, when we go through difficult times, that's what worship does as well. That's what the presence of God does. It brings strength to those situations where there's no strength. It brings hope to the situations where there's no hope. And so he's envisioning that. And it's his way of saying that when we delight in the presence of God, it transforms whatever situation. We don't depend on that situation to be good. We bring something special to it because of the strength of God that lives in us as a result of us just desiring to be in his presence. Ezra has started playing drums some in the last year. And he's gotten to the point now to where he's good enough to where I don't have to, like, we don't come in here like 3 or 4 times during that week and practice beforehand to make sure he's got it. You know, it's usually I can kind of throw whatever we're going to do that day at him, and he usually handles it pretty well. But when he first started playing drums, I would pick songs out, you know, with him in mind, because I wanted to make sure he had a positive experience. So I didn't want to pick out songs that were too hard, because I thought, you know, that would be really frustrating for him. And I would pick out some songs that were just very, very, very fun. You might have to attend to that. I don't know. That were very fun and life-giving for him. That he could have a lot. So it would just be this positive experience for him as he played drums. And so what it means for a drummer is, you know, they want like a bunch of like fast songs, right? You know, because you never met a drummer that says, I really like playing soft and slow. You know, there's no such thing. And in fact, it's really a challenge to play soft and slow for a drummer. That is actually very difficult for them. It takes a lot more control. It takes a lot more artistry. It takes a lot more creativity. So anyway, well, just recently I was telling Ezra, I was like, you're going to be playing drums on this particular week. He said, okay, cool. He said, make sure you pick some fun songs for me to play. What do you mean you're not going to do this? I said, well, I used to do that. Make sure this was, and so I was telling you what I thought your ability set was. But I feel like you've gotten better and that you can handle this. By that is I am trusting you to bring your passion and your enthusiasm to that whatever song we're playing, and that you will make that experience better. That you're not going to wait for the good song to come to you. That you are going to be able to make one song that's happening. You're going to make that a positive experience. That's what the psalmist is saying here. That he's not saying that we're dependent on the situation to be good, but that instead, that wherever we are and whatever we're going through, that God's presence is so that it transforms whatever situation we're in. God, because what we find when that happens is that God is enough. That we're not dependent on the situation, but that God and God's presence is enough. And these kind of worshipers get that. And they experience that. Well, let's keep moving. Let's keep moving for the last part of it. It says this. Verse 11. O Lord God of heaven's armies, hear my prayer. Listen, God, look with favor upon the king, our shield. Show favor to the one you have anointed. A single day in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather be a gatekeeper in the house of my God than live the good life in the home of the wicked. For the Lord God is our sun and our shield. He gives us grace and glory. The Lord will withhold no good thing from those who do what is right. O Lord of heaven's armies, what joy for those who trust in you. So these verses, it's like he's back in the temple. You know, they were on a journey in the last section. But these verses, they're back present back experiencing his presence. And what he's celebrating here is the fact that being God's presence, it's a source of provision, it's a source of protection. He refers to God as the sun and our shield. He is our sun. He's the one that provides for us. He is our shield. He's the one that protects us and defends us. And he's celebrating that. But that protection comes to those who are in his presence, who light in his presence. And so it's the celebration of, I just love being in the presence of God. And one of the things he says in here that's just really interesting, you know, as I said when I started, the author of this is Korah. So, which that'd be really frustrating, you know, because there's probably a bunch of them. So whoever wrote this didn't get any, you know, props himself. You know, it's just kind of like you're just one of this group of people called the sons of Korah. But Korah was a Levite, and so it was kind of the ones descended from him. And here's the deal with the Levites. When God designated the 12 tribes of Israel, he took the tribe of Levi, and he said, you're not going to be counted as one of the 12 tribes. You're a distinct tribe, and you're going to be set apart to be the tribe that's designated in my tabernacle and later in the temple. That is going to be your job, and it's a special task. You have been given, this is an honor that you have been given. And he gave it to the tribe of Levi because Moses and Aaron came from the tribe of Levi, and they were very faithful when everybody else wasn't. So he gave them this honor. But here's the thing. The priests are the ones that got to do the really cool stuff. You know, they got to kill the animal up in front and do all the kind of hocus pocus stuff and whatnot. They were kind of center stage. And so the big deal was getting to do that. But those priests were the ones that were descended from Aaron, and then as more of those formed, they kept picking a specific family line to say, these are the ones that are designated the priests. Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry, Aaron, that it's possessed. I don't know what has happened. You know, that it is. It's just in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But the Levites were the rest of the ones in that tribe. Okay, that's fine. Just don't worry about it. Just they were the rest of the ones in that tribe. Jennifer's going to sing a special, right, at the end of this. There's only one more song. It's a really good song. So if you're not doing it, I'm doing it. But the Levites were the ones that were from that tribe, but they weren't of that proper family line, so they didn't get to do the cool stuff up front. And instead, they had the task of, they worked in the temple, but they kind of had the grunt jobs. You know, someone's got to pass out the bulletins, right? Someone's got to clean up the mess afterwards. Someone's got to probably clean up the blood after the sacrifice is done. Someone's got to get the firewood to get the fire going, you know. And it's not the priests in their, you know, lofty position. It's the Levites that attend to those jobs. And Korah and his descendants were a part of the Levites. And they particularly had gifts of music, so they wrote songs and things like that. And so this, you can see in this guy that he recognizes that he has responsibilities that bring him to the temple. Some not very fun responsibilities. The Korah. And in this, he describes himself as a gatekeeper. A single day in your courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather be a gatekeeper in the house of my God than live the good life in the homes of the wicked. Which the gatekeeper was not a prestigious job, you know. But it was like he was saying, I don't care if I'm doing the grunt work. I am thankful for it because I get to be in your house. I get to be in your presence more than I would otherwise. And I am so thankful for that, is what he said. We have an orderly at the prison. He works in the, we have a number of orderlies who work in the chapel. But one particular orderly, he's a Christian, and he helps get things. And he takes it very seriously. And he's wonderful at doing kind of the typical orderly things, and cleaning and whatnot. But when it comes to setting up for Sunday, he always goes above and beyond. And he takes a lot of pride in getting that room set up for worship. And he'll come even when he's already gotten set up earlier in the morning. He'll come because we meet at noon, and so he'll come after chow, you know, before everybody else is there. And nothing else really needs to be done, but he just loves to be in there. And sometimes I'll hear him in there, and it's like he's got his little MP3 player plugged in, and he's just singing worship songs at the top of his lungs. And you know the scripture that says, make a joyful noise to the Lord. That is what it is. It is a joyful noise. It's awful. He can't sing worth a lick, and he knows it. But he's just singing at the top of his lungs. And then other times I won't hear any rustling, and I'll peek in there, and he's just face down on the floor, just praying and worshiping all by himself, loving every minute of it. And when I read it, I just think of him. It's like, you know, I would clean toilets for the rest of my life if that meant I got to spend a little more time in this place and in your presence. That's what the psalmist is saying. And in that we get this picture of this individual that is so passionate for God, that is so passionate for his presence, this is a guy that does not know what it means to be present but not be present. This is a guy that does not know what it's like to be in the presence of God but not really be present in the presence of God. This is someone who delights in being in God's presence. And when we talk about this song, and what I think that the invitation of this song is, it's for us to become that kind of people. Become those kind of people, individually and corporately. That we have this desire to know him. I want to know you. I want to see your face. You know, when I was kind of getting ready for it, I just jotted down some song ideas. And Jennifer grabbed a couple of them. And she pulled some of her own. But that was one of them. And that one takes me back to a time in my life where I was just so passionate for the presence of God. And that song became it became a vehicle for saying what was going on in my heart. I want to know you. I want to be in your presence. I want to be with you. That is what I want more than anything else. And this psalm invites us to this. So we're talking about what this means for you and me. I think the challenge of this is, are we that kind of people? That we desire God's presence at the core of who we are, with everything in our being, with everything in us. Are we that kind of people? Because here's the thing, if that is not true of us, if we're just trusting that if we go through the motions, that's just going to happen. I'll tell you this, a lot of times that doesn't happen. It can happen. And I think we should continue to go through the motions even when our heart's not in it. I think, in my opinion, I think we should. Some people don't agree with that. I think we should. Because I think sometimes the practice can help draw us out of ourselves. But if you're just counting on that to jumpstart you, and you're not actively seeking Him, there's this risk that we're just going to fall into this habit of just going through the motions and not connecting with the Father, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the challenge of this verse, of this psalm, is to not become that kind of people. It's to give us an example of someone that knew nothing of that kind of experience. To be people that are not just present with God, but are truly present with God. That are not just people that come into God's presence, but truly experience God's presence. Because that is what we want at the very core of who we are. That's what we're seeking at the very core of who we are. And this psalm challenges us to that. On Friday, Jennifer was going back and forth about whether she was going to go to the football game. And when she found out we were on lockdown, she has on lockdown right now. 3 fights in a row will do that. So it's been somewhat of a quiet weekend, although I went over to the camp and they got real needy all of a sudden when I got out there. So anyway, so it wasn't as quiet as I thought it would be. But our meeting screen has been on lockdown this weekend. And so as soon as she found out, she's like, hey, do you know? I'm like, well, I probably could. Why? Anything specific? And she wanted to go to the football game. She's like, I want to go to the football game. I'm like, isn't it a away game? Yeah, it's in Lawrenceville. I'm like, I do not. I didn't want to. I mean, but bottom line, she wanted to. I didn't want to. I did not want to drive 45 minutes each way to watch football. I was like, we'll catch them next week or the week after when they're home. You know, I'll see them then. And so we, I was the fuddy-duddy who ended up not going to the game. But Isaac and Ezra went to the game, and Isaac was excited. Seniors kind of get to be some of the leaders in the student section. So yes, Adam's nodding his head. Yes, we rule the student section now because we are the big cheese this year. Ezra was excited. He has, which I think he got from Aaron Sisson, the full body red man suit, right? And when I say full body, it is full body other than the fingertips, right?
Well, he cut them off.
You
It
cut the
had the
fingertips off.
fingers.
Okay. You want to be able to eat pizza. There you go. But when I say full body,
They're getting smaller. My hand is like.
you're busting out of it. But anyway, I mean, it was like full body. It zips all the way up to the forehead. So all he had was like a little tuft of hair sitting out the top, and you can kind of breathe through it. And so he had that on, and like his jersey and shorts and stuff like that, and they were just ready to go to the game. And later, someone sent us a video they took of Isaac and Ezra and some others were up front dancing, during the game. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I, when I came home, we sat on the couch and watched the game, which was a lot of fun. But I can say this right now, that even though we all 4 of us saw the same game, we didn't have the same experience, right? I mean, not even close. Because we were just kind of there, and we're still having our conversation, we're still eating our food, and they were present. They were excited to experience what was going on in that game. And I think that's the challenge in the invitation of this song. For us to be that kind of people that experience God's presence in His fullness and to refuse to settle for anything less than that. Recognizing that there's sometimes that presence is going to take a weird form. It might be, as we learned in other songs, it might be in the form of a lament. It might be you experience His presence because you're bawling your eyes out. It might be you experience His presence because you share a testimony with Chad, which was wonderful, what you shared. A testimony of God's miraculous healing. I mean, it might take different forms. But the challenge of this psalm is to be people that would say, but I want to be fully there and experience the fullness of God's presence. I don't want to just go through the motions. I want to connect with the Father. And that's my prayer, that we'll become that kind of people. Let's pray. God, I thank you. I thank you that you want to be in relationship with us. We take that for granted so much. You're always there. You've always been there. We have oftentimes heard that message of you wanting to be in a relationship with us, so that just seems like old hat for us. And yet you are the God of the universe, and you want to be in relationship with us. You are the creator of all things, and you condescend to meet us in places of worship, and actually to meet us in the center of our hearts, in the center of our lives. And thank you for that. Thank you that that's the kind of God that you are. God, I pray that you will help us to be the type of people that are blown away by that, week by week, day by day, moment by moment, that we are so excited to know that we push forward, that we push into your presence every chance that we get, and that we're intentional about it, so that we can know you more, so that we can experience you more, so that we can be more than just present, but that we can actually experience your presence to its fullest. May that be true of us. May we experience that here in this place as we worship here at the Grace Project. May we experience that in our own times of prayer and study. May we experience that when we meet with that friend or family member for coffee and for prayer and to connect with each other's lives. May we experience the fullness of your presence and not settle for anything less than that, because we know you want to meet us there. I just pray that you'll give us that kind of yearning and desire in our own hearts and lives. But we love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
for being a God who keeps his promises. Thank you for being a God we can rely on. Thank you that as we look back, we've seen you be faithful. And so we have no reason to doubt that you would be faithful as we are brave and reach out to know you and to be fully in your presence. Lord, we love you. In Jesus' name.